Hello. My name is Rachel Green and I died once because I loved the wrong man. They say the past is buried, but mine clawed its way out of the grave the moment I opened my eyes and realized time had turned back. The air was thick with the scent of summer jasmine when Nathan Yee knelt in front of the patriarch, shouting, "She's a fraud. Rachel isn't even Mr. Green's real daughter." His voice rang through the marble estate like a whip. I stood there silently, my palms damp, heart steady, eyes locked on the man I once believed would protect me. Mr. Yee Sr. furrowed his brows, sharp lines etched deep into his weathered face. The estate's chandeliers cast fractured light over us, making every tension sparkle with cruel clarity. "Is that true?" he asked, his voice gravelly yet measured, like a blade hidden in silk. I didn't flinch. "Yes," I said calmly, offering him a soft nod. "I'm not his biological daughter, but he raised me, taught me, and trusted me with his legacy." Nathan's triumphant smirk told me he thought he'd won. He didn't realize the war had just begun. "How dare you?" the old man spat, slamming his cane against the floor. "You deceived me, nearly tricked your way into my family." "I didn't deceive you," I corrected gently, letting my words hang in the air like fine smoke. "I was invited into this house. I didn't ask for anything." "Well, you're out now," Nathan snapped. "From now on, Chloe will be the one marrying into our family. You, Rachel Green, will work under her as her assistant." I blinked. That was new. In my past life, he hadn't humiliated me quite this early. I gave a little bow. "As you wish." My compliance caught him off guard. His pupils contracted, his smugness faltered. He followed me as I exited the manor. The heavy iron gates creaked as I stepped out, but he reached for my wrist. "Why are you so calm?" he hissed. "What are you planning?" I looked at his hand gripping mine and raised an amused brow. "Mr. Yee," I said with a delicate smile, "the engagement's been cancelled. Technically, you should call me sister now, don't you think?" He paled. "Don't play games with me, Rachel. You're hiding something. No one gives up like this. What are you scheming?" "Nothing you need to worry about." My voice dropped to a whisper. "After all, I know better than anyone how powerful your family is. It'd be stupid to defy you. Isn't that what you want to hear?" The rage burning behind his eyes flickered into suspicion. "Rachel Green," he said slowly, voice tight, "you've been reborn, haven't you?" The wind blew through the hedges behind me. I tilted my head and gave him a look of innocent confusion. "Reborn? Nathan, have you been reading too many web novels?" He stared at me, his mouth pressed into a grim line, and then leaned in close enough for me to smell the citrus cologne he always wore. "Stay away from Chloe. From me. Be a good little assistant. Don't cause trouble, because if you try anything, I'll destroy you." "Noted," I said, biting back a laugh. I returned to Mr. Green's estate that evening, only to find a swarm of reporters waiting like vultures on the steps. Microphones were shoved in my face. Cameras clicked like a firing squad. "Miss Green, how do you feel about being exposed as a fake? How dare you pretend to be the stock god's heir? You took her place for 10 years, though. You feel no shame?" I raised my chin and walked through them without a word. Let them bark. I knew who orchestrated the circus. Chloe. Or rather, Nathan through Chloe. He'd always preferred her soft sobs to my silence. Inside, Mr. Green stood waiting by the study, sweat glistening on his brow. "Rachel, we need a solution. Chloe, she doesn't even know what an MA line is. If Nathan finds out we've been lying..." I took a sip of the tea already laid out on the coffee table. "Why not just tell the truth?" "We can't." He began pacing, wringing his hands. "The Yee family only cares about marrying into the stock god lineage. If they learn Chloe has no talent," he trailed off and glanced at me. "What if we find an excuse for you to marry into the family after all? We can say you're still the representative of my legacy, even if not by blood." The door burst open. Chloe stormed in, mascara streaking her face. "No, you can't. I won't let her steal my future again." Her blouse fluttered as she lifted it, revealing a faint bump. I'm pregnant with Nathan's child. I have to marry him. My stomach turned. The sight of her belly brought back too many memories, long nights trading in secret, stomach ulcers from stress, all while Nathan lay beside her. You're being irrational, Mr. Green said sternly. This is for your own good. Don't lie to me, she screamed, flinging herself at me. Her palm cracked across my face. You slut! Are you seducing Dad again with your fake pity act? You think a bastard like you can compete with me? She lunged again, but her heel snagged the carpet. Time slowed. Her forehead slammed into the sharp edge of the mahogany table. Blood pooled on the rug. Chloe. Nathan charged into the room, sweeping her into his arms like the scene in some bad drama. Rachel, you monster. You attacked a pregnant woman. She was the one who hit me, I said, voice calm. And, maybe next time, she should wear shoes more suited for a 5-month belly. Enough, Nathan roared. You're done playing the victim. He seized the inkstone from the desk and hurled it at me. It struck my forehead. Everything went black. When I came to, I was gagged, bound, and being dragged into a van. Someone pulled a hood over my head. The next thing I knew, I was under harsh lights in a massive arena. Cameras everywhere. Microphones booming. A global live broadcast. Nathan stood beside me, smug and triumphant. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, gripping my chin, this is Rachel Green, the fraud who claimed to be the stock god's daughter. She's a fake. She stole Chloe's birthright. And now, she's paying the price. The audience erupted. Liar. Rot in hell. Fraud. A tomato splattered across my face. The sting of acid in my eye made it hard to see. I could have screamed. I didn't. I lifted my chin. Nathan, I said, my voice low, unwavering, when your half-brother tried to destroy you with short stocks, who turned the market in your favor overnight. His expression twitched. When Wall Street targeted Ye Corporation, who leveraged 10-to-1 to save your ass in 3 minutes. I pressed forward. You stand there and call me a liar. But everything you have, you stood on my shoulders to reach it. And then you pushed me off. Nathan's mask cracked. His voice dropped to a whisper only I could hear. You finally admit it. But don't forget, I know the truth too. Chloe told me before she died in our past life. You lost your gift after she was gone. You couldn't save me anymore. I laughed bitterly. So that was it. He believed the lie Chloe whispered in her final breath, a lie that cost me my life. He looked me dead in the eyes. I'll ruin you all over again. This time, the whole world will know what a fraud you are. The crowd roared louder. But I didn't break. I didn't cry. I only looked at him and thought, this time, Nathan Yee, you'll be the one begging for mercy. And I'll be the one watching. They thought I'd be broken after the broadcast. That I'd crawl away in disgrace, too humiliated to face daylight. But shame doesn't touch someone who's already died once. I walked back into Mr. Green's manor, reeking of tomato pulp and ridicule, every inch of my body aching. The first thing I did was step into the shower and scrub until my skin turned red and raw. No matter how many times I lathered, the invisible fingerprints of the world's judgment clung to me like parasites. Outside the steamed glass, I caught a glimpse of Mr. Green standing there, guilt etched into every deep crease of his face. Rachel, he said, his voice strangled, I never thought they'd go that far. I didn't answer. What could he possibly say to undo the fact that he let them parade me like a criminal in front of half the planet? I finally spoke, calm but cold. I made you $37 billion over the last 10 years. Consider your debt to my father paid in full. He bowed his head, not in protest, in acceptance. You're leaving, he murmured. I have to, I replied, stepping past him in a fresh black dress, damp hair still dripping. As long as Nathan and Chloe are in this house, I'm not safe. His lips parted as if to offer comfort, then closed again. I appreciated the silence. It was the first true respect he'd shown me in years. But fate, or perhaps irony, doesn't rest. Just as I reached for the door, the housekeeper dashed in, nearly tripping over herself. Mr. Green, she panted. The Yi family is here again. They're proposing marriage, this time on behalf of the second son. My eyes narrowed. Daniel? That was unexpected. In my past life, Daniel Yi was a shadow, rumored to be autistic, nonverbal, violent when provoked. I only ever saw glimpses of him behind locked doors and silk curtains. Nathan had laughed behind his hand, calling him the family embarrassment. So why now? Chloe floated into the room then, wrapped around Nathan like a trophy ribbon. Sister, she cooed, every syllable dripping with false sweetness. Nathan pulled a lot of strings to make this happen. It's a generous offer. I turned to them, raising a brow. You're marrying me off to the mentally impaired one now. Nathan smirked.
Come now.
He's not entirely useless. Sure, he sometimes bites people, and his IQ's stuck at 3 years old, but hey, you won't be lonely in the countryside. Chloe giggled behind her hand, eyes gleaming with cruelty. It's perfect. You won't be alone, and I won't have to worry about you showing up at our wedding looking tragic. I smiled sweetly, then turned and dumped the ornate key Nathan handed me straight into the storm drain by the entrance. Oops. What are you doing? He barked. Rejecting your charity, I said without missing a beat. Next time, try to disguise your jealousy better. It's leaking through your smug grin. His hand twitched like he wanted to slap me, but Chloe's grip on his sleeve stopped him. Coward. That night, as if the universe had a sense of humor, I was summoned to the garden pavilion for a meeting with Daniel Yi. I half expected him to arrive in a helmet, drooling. But what walked in was a man tall, poised, every inch of his movement deliberate. His eyes were sharp, almost surgical, and when he sat down across from me, he did so with an elegance that made my spine stiffen. Miss Green, he said, his voice smooth like bourbon. I've heard quite a lot about you. I blinked. You're not insane? No. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. But it's a useful mask in a house full of vultures. Why reveal the truth to me? I asked cautiously. He gave a small, humorless smile. Because I don't intend to stay a ghost in my own family forever. And you strike me as a woman who understands revenge isn't satisfying unless it's poetic. For a moment, I said nothing, just stared at the man everyone dismissed as broken. I slid my phone across the table, screen unlocked. Here, I said. My trading logs. Crude oil, NASDAQ, foreign futures. My fingerprints are on every shift in the market. If you really want power, I can help you get it. Daniel studied the data with a hunger that matched my own. You'd help me? He asked quietly. Why? Because, I said, voice low. Nathan and Chloe tried to bury me. But I'm not a seed, I'm a fire. And I plan to burn the house down. You in. He smiled for the first time, truly smiled. Let's raise it to the ground. The next morning, the Yi family arrived bearing wedding gifts, gold, antiques, stocks. Gifts meant to humiliate me, because of course they assumed I'd be insulted to marry the mad son. But what they didn't realize was that Daniel and I had already begun plotting behind their backs. Chloe's face twisted when she saw the opulence. So much fuss for a charity marriage, she muttered under her breath. I turned to her, my voice like silk-wrapped steel. At least I'm wanted. You had to trap Nathan with a pregnancy to get a ring. Her face blanched, and for a flicker of a second, she looked small. But she recovered quickly. You think you've won because you're marrying a fool? She snapped. Nathan and I are the true heirs. You're just backup. Then enjoy your spotlight, I said, brushing past her. But make sure you enjoy it quickly. Storms don't send warnings before they strike. That night, Nathan appeared at my window like a moth drawn to flame. Rachel, he said, you don't have to do this. Do what? I asked, not bothering to hide my disdain. Marry a man who doesn't even know how to tie his shoes. I know you. You're proud, driven. You're not built to rot in the countryside. What exactly are you offering? I asked coldly. He stepped closer. Be my mistress. I'll take care of you. I know you still want me. Wow, I whispered. You truly believe you're irresistible, don't you? He laughed softly. You used to love me. I used to believe the world was fair too, I replied, but we all grow up. His hand reached for me. I slapped it away. Rachel, he warned. Go to hell, Nathan, I said. And take your ego with you. The next day, Daniel and I officially announced our engagement. In private, we plotted. In public, we smiled. And the world, clueless as ever, ate it up. Nathan's smugness cracked. Chloe's smiles began to falter. Because what they feared the most wasn't my silence. It was my return. Not as the orphan daughter they once tossed aside, but as the storm that would drown them both. It rained the night before the wedding in Omen, perhaps if you believe in that sort of thing. The sky wept steadily over the Yi family estate, draping the garden in a silver fog that swallowed the marble lions and turned the rose bushes into dripping silhouettes. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in the guest wing, adjusting the neckline of my ivory dress. The satin was deliberately plain, no lace, no beads, just clean lines and sharp edges, a statement in itself. Beside me, Daniel adjusted his cufflinks, his reflection composed, almost regal. You don't have to go through with this, he said quietly, though his eyes never left mine in the mirror. It's not too late to walk away. Walk away from what? I asked, lips curling into something between amusement and determination. The first real war I've ever chosen for myself? He chuckled, low and dry, then offered his arm. Let's make history. Downstairs, the ballroom was filled with dignitaries, old money elites, and journalists disguised in pearls. Flashbulbs popped like fireworks as Nathan emerged from a Rolls-Royce Phantom, Chloe clinging to his arm like an overfed cat. His posture screamed victory, but his eyes, those weren't eyes of a man in control. They darted, searched. When he didn't find me in the countryside manor he thought I'd be exiled to, his confidence faltered. Where's Rachel? He asked sharply. The answer came from Mr. Green himself, standing like a statue in front of the ancestral portraits. She's preparing to marry the second son. Silence fell. Then chaos. Nathan stormed into the main hall like a man possessed, Chloe trailing behind, her heels catching on the edge of her overly dramatic train. He burst into the ceremonial chamber, just as Daniel and I were bowing before the altar. Rachel, he barked, you're not allowed to marry him. Daniel stepped in front of me, calm and unshaken. You already have a wife, brother. You don't get two. You're mentally unstable. Nathan snapped. Autism is hereditary. What are you thinking, marrying someone like her? Let me have two wives, one to keep up appearances and one to take care of Rachel behind the scenes. Chloe gasped, whether in offense or delight, I couldn't tell. You're disgusting, Daniel said, voice like ice cutting through velvet. Nathan's mouth twitched. So, you're not stupid anymore, huh? Disappointed, Daniel asked. That I can speak for myself now? That your fallback puppet found his strings and cut them? The room rippled with whispers. Chloe looked like she was going to faint. I stepped forward, lacing my fingers through Daniel's. Mr. Yi, I said, Rachel Green, will only marry Daniel in this life. You are no longer welcome in mine. His expression twisted, somewhere between rage and desperation. But before he could reply, his father's guards seized him. Let me go, he shouted, thrashing. You can't do this. I built everything. I'm the heir. The ceremony resumed without him. Chloe sobbed through her aborted wedding, her cries echoing through a live feed that was meant to showcase a dynasty's triumph. The Yi patriarch smashed his teacup in fury backstage. You're humiliating the family name on live television, he screamed, but even that couldn't fix the optics. The next morning, I woke in the master suite of the Yi mansion with sunlight warming the silk sheets and the scent of coffee lingering in the air. Daniel was already dressed, reading the morning stock reports on his tablet. How does it feel, he asked, to be the wife of a man the world thought was a broken toy? Strangely empowering, I replied, slipping into my robe. Downstairs, Nathan's fury still festered. When we passed him in the hall, his glare could have cut through bone. Rachel, you're doing this to spite me. No, I said without stopping. I'm doing it to bury you. The real shift came in the family's quarterly shareholder meeting. Daniel and I entered as a united front while Nathan seethed at the far end of the table. Chloe sat beside him, her face a pale mask, voice hoarse from trying to spin last night's debacle into a noble act of sacrifice. We're focusing on public support, she announced. Yesterday's marriage may have been messy, but thanks to my financial insights, our PR metrics have skyrocketed. The media is calling us the people's stock family. The board clapped politely. I smiled, slow and precise. Curious, I said, pulling up a financial projection on the overhead screen. Because according to my data, the crude oil recommendation you gave last week just cost this group $30 million in projected losses. Chloe froze. What? You told retail investors to bottom out at $28 per barrel, I said. 3 days later, crude oil went negative. The damage is real. People are protesting outside. She tried to laugh it off. No one could have predicted that. You used the stock god's name to justify it. I cut in. Told them my father's wisdom backed your choice. That's criminal misrepresentation. The room turned cold. Even Nathan's jaw slackened. Mr. Yi Sr. rose slowly from his chair, documents trembling in his hand. If Daniel and Rachel hadn't caught this in time, he said, voice laced with fury, our legacy would have been destroyed. Chloe's mouth opened and closed, fish-like. Then she turned to Nathan with panic. You told me it was a good idea. You said we needed a dramatic win. Nathan stood, trembling with suppressed rage. I trusted you. You said you understood trading. Because you kept comparing me to her, she shrieked. Of course I lied. How else was I supposed to compete with your precious Rachel? Mr. Yi turned to Mr. Green, who had been silent until now. Your daughter is not my daughter by blood, Mr. Green said, removing his glasses with a sigh. But she's the one who's been running this legacy for years. I only wore the title. The room erupted into stunned silence. Nathan staggered backward, eyes wide with recognition. It was always you, he whispered. All those years, he dropped to his knees with a thud. Rachel, I'm sorry. I didn't know. Too believed Chloe. She told me you faked everything. That you stole her records. That you killed her baby. My breath hitched. For a heartbeat, I was back in that moment, his eyes watching me choke on poison wine, his fingers tightening on the stem of the glass as I pleaded for truth. You believed her, I said softly, and you let me die. Let me make it right, he begged. I'll divorce her. I'll marry you. We'll rebuild it all. I swear, you're the only one I've ever. Daniel stepped between us, face stone cold. Get up, he said. And get out. She's my wife now. You don't exist in her future. Chloe lunged forward, shrieking. You're taking everything. First my father's love, now my husband. I don't want your trash, I said. Keep it. Hold it tight. Sleep beside it every night, and remember I left it behind. Nathan's face collapsed. You loved me. I outgrew you, I said. It happens, Mr. Yi Sr. slammed his palm on the table. Enough. From this day forward, Nathan Yi is stripped of all positions within the group. Linda Walker, Chloe's mother, stood up, horrified. Master Yi, please, he's just confused, he's dangerous, the old man said coldly. And you enabled it. As we exited the room, Daniel turned to me and whispered, that was only the beginning. Good. I replied, my hand tightening around his. Because I'm just getting started. Power is a quiet thing when it's real. It doesn't scream. It doesn't announce itself. It moves like a shadow behind a silkscreen, patient, deliberate, and devastating. After Nathan's disgrace, the once impenetrable walls of the Yi Empire began to tremble, not from external pressure, but from rot that had been festering for years. I walked through the mirrored halls of Zane Corporation not as a daughter-in-law, not even as the so-called stalk God's heir, but as myself, Rachel Green, the woman who'd once been buried alive by lies and was now climbing out with diamond-tipped claws. Daniel sat at the head of the boardroom table, tailored suit sharp, fingers steepled under his chin as he studied the room like a tactician surveying a battlefield. The directors were quiet today. Too quiet. After all, the golden boy had fallen, and his enemies masked as uncles and cousins were waiting for the right moment to strike. "They're circling," I murmured to Daniel once the room cleared. "They smell weakness." "Let them," he replied, tapping a closed file in front of him. "They're about to bite into poison." I didn't ask what was in the file. I didn't need to. I trusted him now in a way I hadn't trusted anyone since the moment Nathan poured wine into my glass with poison in his eyes. Across town, Chloe tried to salvage her crumbling world. She attended galas in gowns 2 sizes too tight, clinging to Nathan like a lifeline no longer tethered to anything solid. The media still called her the investment princess, but the whispers had begun. People remembered that it was her advice that tanked crude oil portfolios. That her name was the one retail investors had followed to ruin. It didn't help that a viral video surfaced of an elderly man collapsing on the steps of the Yi building, clutching a mortgage letter and crying. She said it was guaranteed. She said my grandchildren would go to college. Chloe's PR team scrambled, of course. Press statements, fake donation receipts, an apology posted in pastel font with a haloed photo of her face. But the damage was done. Meanwhile, Daniel and I had turned our so-called marriage into a machine. I handled strategy. He handled power. We launched a transparency initiative through Zane Corp's tech division, giving ordinary people access to simplified financial tools and real-time advisory checks. It was radical. It was disruptive. And it worked. The company's public trust rating soared. My inbox filled with thank you letters, people sending photos of their first savings accounts, their kids' school tuition paid in full. It felt clean, like washing the blood off the blade and realizing you could still use it to plant something instead of cut. But Nathan didn't disappear. We found out he'd been meeting with foreign investors, venture capitalists known for hostile takeovers. He was trying to raise enough backing to force a board vote to strip Daniel of control. Mr. Yi Sr. was still recovering from the public fallout, and Daniel, though competent, hadn't yet locked the entire board. One slip could tip the balance. "He's getting desperate," I said one evening, staring out at the city from the penthouse window, the skyline like a jagged heartbeat against the dark. Daniel poured me wine, his expression unreadable. "That makes him more dangerous." "Then we'll give him exactly what he wants," I said. "Let him think he's winning." The bait was simple, an announcement of Daniel's upcoming absence due to a medical retreat abroad. In truth, he was simply relocating temporarily to a Zane R&D facility in Seattle, working remotely. But to someone like Nathan, it smelled like weakness. Within 2 days, he held a secret meeting with 3 of the side branch uncles. They signed papers, planned a coup, smiled over aged whiskey. What they didn't realize was that the documents they signed had been altered, every clause carefully rearranged, every signature a trap. Daniel had predicted every move. I handled the lawyers. The morning of the board meeting was a storm of suits, accusations, and boardroom theatrics. Nathan swaggered in, confident and condescending. "Father," he said smoothly, "you've done enough. It's time for the next generation to take over." Mr. Yi Sr., pale and tired, rose slowly. "And which generation would that be? The one who collapsed an entire investment branch? Or the one that built a new model from the ashes?" Nathan didn't flinch. He turned to the board, holding up the fake power transfer agreement like it was Excalibur. "Gentlemen, with this document, I have controlling interest." He smiled at me then, just a flicker, the same smile he wore the day he betrayed me. Checkmate. Daniel stood from the back of the room, his voice calm. "Actually, that document nullifies itself." "What are you talking about?" Nathan snapped. "It's been notarized, signed, and modified," I said, stepping beside Daniel, laying out the real version side by side with his forged one. Every clause you thought would give you control has a buried clause that transfers it right back to Daniel. You signed your own expulsion. The uncles paled. One of them swore under his breath. Another ripped off his glasses. Nathan's face went slack. Then red. Then white. You tricked me. No, I said. You underestimated me. As the security guards approached to escort him out, Nathan lunged toward Daniel, toward me. I wasn't sure, but he was intercepted. Thrown to the ground like the paper king he'd always been. You stole everything from me, he screamed as they dragged him away. I was supposed to be the heir. You were supposed to be decent, I murmured. You failed at that too. Chloe didn't show up at the board meeting. She was last seen in the VIP section of an underground casino, draped in fake fur, mascara streaked down her face. Word got out about her arrest for fraud when she tried to pawn off a fake stock certificate. She wasn't worth chasing anymore. Not even the tabloids cared. As for Daniel and me, we didn't celebrate. Not with champagne or parades. That night, we returned to the penthouse, kicked off our shoes, and made grilled cheese sandwiches on the kitchen stove. It's done, he said, offering me a sandwich with burnt corners. Not yet, I replied, taking a bite. Not until Zane Corporation stops being a castle and starts being a lifeline. Then let's build the bridge. The next day, we held a press conference not about our enemies, but about our future. A new children's hospital. A sustainable housing initiative. Financial literacy programs for underprivileged teens. The public, weary of wealth, leaned in. Because people don't need perfection. They need proof that power can be used without cruelty. And we gave it to them. Slowly, the world stopped seeing me as the girl who tried to marry into money and failed. They started calling me something else. Visionary. Survivor. Strategist. But I didn't care about the titles. Only the work. Only the peace in knowing that every empire Nathan built on my blood had been reclaimed and transformed. Not into revenge. Into redemption. And that was a currency he never understood. They say empires collapse slowly, then all at once. For Nathan Yee, it wasn't a fall, it was an implosion. A detonation set off by arrogance and wrapped in betrayal, just waiting for the right spark. The boardroom coup had failed. His alliances had crumbled. But what destroyed him wasn't the documents we forged or the policies we passed. It was the silence that followed. No more phone calls. No handshakes. No invitations. When your entire existence relies on being perceived as important, invisibility becomes a death sentence. He tried to regroup, of course. Late-night meetings with shadowy foreign investors, cryptic emails to his mother's old contacts in Europe, even desperate calls to private lenders promising returns he had no way to deliver. But reputation is currency, and his had gone bankrupt. Daniel and I watched from a distance, not out of cruelty but necessity. We couldn't touch the wound, only let it rot. And rot it did. I heard from one of our internal sources that Nathan was caught trying to liquidate company assets he no longer had the authority to access. Another report mentioned him loitering near the Zane headquarters lobby, dressed in a designer suit a year too old, hair unkempt, smile brittle as glass. The guards didn't even recognize him at first. Then one night, the inevitable came. Daniel was reviewing contract updates in the study, while I sat nearby, organizing a timeline for our upcoming National Youth Finance Initiative. The housekeeper knocked gently and entered with a single envelope. Red wax seal. No return address. I opened it, my heart strangely calm. Inside was a single sentence written in Nathan's familiar scrawl. You were always meant to be mine. I handed the letter to Daniel without a word. He read it once, then tore it in half with quiet precision. He's not coming back, he said. He doesn't know how. But Nathan didn't disappear quietly. Days later, he made one final gambling illegal one. With the help of two disgruntled ex-board members, he attempted to divert funds from one of Zane's international subsidiaries. The attempt was amateur. Sloppy. He left a digital trail so bright, it was like watching someone try to rob a bank with a flashlight taped to their forehead. I personally handed the case to our legal team. Daniel ensured the prosecution involved Interpol. When Nathan tried to flee through a private airport in Singapore, he was detained. Photographs surfaced of him in handcuffs, head down, flanked by 2 officers in dark suits. The world had loved him once. Now, it barely remembered his name. Chloe, in contrast, hadn't so much fallen as evaporated. After her arrest for fraud and subsequent release under strict conditions, she faded from public view. A few anonymous posts on internet forums claimed to have seen her in casinos across Macau, dressed in imitation luxury, hair bleached to brittle straw, makeup smeared like forgotten theater paint. One particularly cruel photo showed her passed out at a high-stakes table, a champagne flute knocked over beside her, her arm littered with faint puncture marks. No one commented on the post. It needed none. As for Linda Walker, the once proud socialite who built her entire life on being adjacent to power, her fate was more tragic than pitiful. Rumor had it she refused to speak after the scandal. The staff at her estate reported that she spent her days in the solarium, wearing the same pearl necklace, staring at nothing while murmuring to the air as if still commanding a room. She was eventually moved to a private psychiatric facility upstate. When Daniel told me, I nodded once and changed the subject. There was nothing left to say. Grief and guilt had never belonged to me in this story, not this time. But not every battle ends in ashes. Some bloom. In the weeks that followed Nathan's conviction, Daniel and I stood before the global press once more, this time not to defend ourselves but to announce a restructuring of Zane Corporation. We dissolved the old board, created a public oversight committee, invested in building community-focused AI tools that democratized access to financial planning. We expanded our hospital partnerships, sponsored mobile clinics in rural counties, and in the Western District, we rebuilt the old community center and renamed it after Daniel's late mother, the only person in his childhood who'd ever called him brilliant. I remember the ribbon-cutting ceremony. The sun was merciless that day, burning down on our matching navy suits as we stood side by side, smiling for a sea of flashing cameras. But I wasn't thinking about the press. I was watching a child barefoot, wild curls, missing a front tooth race through the glass doors, yelling, "It's open. It's finally open." And behind her, dozens more followed. They didn't know who I was. Didn't care. They weren't there for revenge. They were there to learn, to build, to dream. That night, Daniel and I returned home and sat on the terrace, barefoot and exhausted, 2 wine glasses between us and a city glowing beneath our feet. "Do you remember," he asked softly, "the day I first spoke to you without pretending to be broken?" "Of course I do," I said. "You were wearing a gray sweater and too much cologne." He laughed. "I was nervous. You were terrifying." "I still am," I said, tilting my glass toward his. "To the right people. But not to me." His voice turned quiet. "To me, you've always been light in the middle of fire." I stared at him, my throat catching. It wasn't a grand declaration. It wasn't flowery or forced. But in that moment, it was everything. We didn't toast. We didn't kiss. We just sat there, 2 survivors who had once been weapons and now wanted nothing more than peace. Later that week, the financial magazine Fortune Corp published its annual list of top global strategists. Daniel Yee was named the visionary reformer. I was listed as the ghost architect. No photo, just a quote. She never needed the spotlight. She built the stage. And finally, I was okay with that, because I no longer needed the world to see me. I had already seen it clearly, and I had rewritten my place in it, line by line, choice by choice. Autumn came quietly that year. The leaves didn't fall with drama, but drifted down like forgotten pages, golden and soft, littering the stone paths of the estate I now called home. I had always imagined that revenge would end with a final moment, some fiery crescendo followed by silence. But instead, it dissolved like mist, leaving behind something quieter, deeper. Peace, maybe. Or the space where peace could begin. I woke each morning to the scent of freshly brewed coffee and the rustling of papers as Daniel arranged our schedules beneath a patch of warm morning sun. The man who once hid behind silence now spoke in soft observations and dry wit, surprising me daily with the calm strength that had grown in place of his former caution. Some days, we worked in tandem meetings, planning, reviews. Other days, we simply watched the world move without rushing to shape it. The past no longer chased me, but I carried it like a scar under silk, unseen but permanent. One Saturday, we visited the Chensi school, now fully rebuilt and filled with color. Children in uniforms of soft gray and sky blue ran up to us with paper cranes and cardboard stock charts, giggling as they explained their made-up companies. A little girl tugged at my sleeve and said, "Miss Green, I want to grow up to be you, but nicer." I laughed so hard I almost cried. Daniel knelt beside her and said, "Aim higher." Rachel just set the bar. That night, I stared at the city lights from the balcony and remembered every name, every face, every betrayal. Not with bitterness. With clarity. I remembered Chloe's venom, Nathan's greed, Linda's contempt, the cameras, the headlines, the glass walls that once imprisoned me for the world to watch. They had written my obituary in full view. And still I lived. I didn't just survive. I reinvented, reclaimed, rebuilt. Across the hall, Daniel sat at the piano, fingers brushing over keys with hesitant grace. I never knew he could play. "You're hiding talents now?" I asked, leaning on the doorframe. "You never asked," he murmured without looking up. Besides, I wasn't sure my hands remembered. They do. So, does my heart. His voice cracked slightly, then steadied. It remembers what it felt like when you chose me. Not as a tactic. As a man. I stepped toward him slowly. I chose you because you were the only one who saw through the silence. And because you never asked me to become smaller, so you could shine. "You were already a star," he said. "I just made sure the room wasn't too dark to see you." We stood like that for a while, quiet. Then I said, "Let's do it." "Do what?" "Build the next part. Not for them. Not for redemption. Just because we can." So we did. The following spring, we launched the Aurora Fund, a hybrid investment and relief network that supported startup founders from marginalized communities. Our first investment went to a young single mother from the Bronx who built a budgeting app for teenagers. A month later, we opened the Horizon Clinic in Arizona, specializing in rare genetic disorders. Then came the Eden Project, renewable energy stations in former industrial ghost towns, bringing jobs and clean water where neither had existed in decades. We didn't post photo ops. We didn't brand anything with our names. What mattered was the ripple. What mattered was that one morning, a letter arrived handwritten in ink. I was going to end my life after the oil crash. "You saved me. Thank you for not abandoning us when the markets did." And below it, P.S. My daughter's starting college in the fall. Her name is Rachel. I held that letter in my hands like a lifeline wrapped in paper. Not every war leaves a battlefield. Sometimes, it plants a garden where no one thought flowers could grow again. Years passed. The headlines changed. New dramas emerged. New names lit up the ticker tape. Nathan was sentenced to 12 years in prison without parole. Chloe vanished entirely from public life. Some say she changed her name, moved to another country. Others say she married someone in the underground world and paid off her old debts in ways I didn't want to imagine. Linda Walker died quietly in a sanitarium with no visitors and a faded photograph of her younger self tucked under her pillow. And us? We remained. Not as rulers, but as stewards. Not as survivors, but as architects. On the 5th anniversary of our company's transformation, Daniel and I returned to the rooftop where we first outlined our dream. He held out his hand. "Ready for the next chapter?" I took it. "Only if we write it together." As we stood there, surrounded by wind and distant traffic, a quiet certainty settled over me. I was never meant to be someone's trophy. I was never born to be background. I was the story they tried to erase. but I wrote it back, line by line, with ink forged from fire. And in the end, I didn't need revenge to define me. I needed only one thing, to remember that even when they tried to bury me, they forgot I was a seed.